G'day mates, it's B-Buster here, and I would like to give Talkspace a big shout out for sponsoring this episode. So, at the beginning of the pandemic, I felt like it would only be a few months and this was all temporary, and Talkspace been from before I was born up until around 2016, and it's my understanding that the home was built well before they moved in. The layout of the house is fairly important to most of the experiences, so I'll give a little bit of detail. There was an entryway which connected to a formal living room, the main living area, and then a zigzag hallway. Through the main living room you could get to the kitchen and the dining area, as well as my nana's sewing room. This sewing room was also connected to the formal living room by the according doors, but they were never open. The zigzag hallway contained the master bedroom, a walk-in hall closet, a bathroom, 2 bedrooms, and my papa's study. The study and one of the bedrooms were directly across from each other, at the very end of this hallway towards the very back of the house. I guess I should preface these experiences too by saying that the dynamic of my grandparents and my family were somewhat odd. You see, my grandparents slept in separate bedrooms due to general issues, and my nana's sleep apnea machine and my disabled uncle stayed in the bedroom at the very end of the hall. But my brother and I were there practically every day during the summer, since my mum worked, and so most of the stories that I have come from both of us, even after I stopped staying there when I got old enough to stay home by myself. So, from a very young age, I remember always being on edge when I was there. I felt like I was always being watched and followed throughout the house, especially when I would be in that long zigzag hallway. Now, don't get me wrong, my nana was a hoarder. She hoarded almost anything and everything, but dolls were her main hoard, so I definitely had eyes on me, but this was different. My brother said that he felt the same way, but he chalked it up to being young and scared of our grandparents' crazy house. But it wasn't just feelings, though. I would swear that I would hear footsteps behind me or hear carpet crunch when I was in a room alone. Maybe my brother was right, though, and that these feelings were just us being scared kids or something. Still, a lot of other stuff happened, and it's harder to explain. I mentioned my nana was a hoarder, and that she hoarded just about anything. This meant that not only was the formal living room filled with boxes and just boxes of things, but the sewing room, the hall closet, and even the main living room were also filled as well. She would go on these weird cleaning benders where she decided that my brother and I would help her sort her things, under the premise that she was trying to decide what we could sell and what we could keep. Over the years, I saw a ton of weird heirloom stuff, as well as just weird junk that she decided that she needed at one point. But one thing that really stuck out, though, was her giant ventriloquist doll. This doll, like most of her larger dolls, had its own little chair to sit in, and it was kept in this formal living room amongst the boxes. Whenever we would clean too, my brother and I would play the game of where's Nana's ventriloquist doll, because it was almost never in its chair, despite us always putting it back in the chair when we would clean. Looking back, this is something that's actually a little frightening, to be honest. My nana used a walker and had very limited mobility, so it would be impossible for her to have been moving it around. My papa never messed with stuff like that and also had limited mobility, so it wouldn't have been him either. But without fail, each time that we went looking in that room, the doll was always in a new place. Eventually, too, this doll made its way to my house whenever we moved them out of theirs, and it never left its spot in our garage, which makes me think that whatever was in my nana's house enjoyed messing with us. I say whatever was in her house because, truly, I don't know what was going on. I'm a believer in the paranormal and have had other experiences all through my life that have no connection to this house. However, there's just no real way of knowing what type of thing resides in the home because of how my nana was. She just had tons of weird stuff from random garage and estate sales that she went to, so who knows what she picked up that could have had that energy attached to it. There was also just a lot of negative energy in that house, and as someone who believes that negative energy attracts more malevolent spirits, that's another thing that I think could have influenced this house. There's a lot more that I could go on about, but I feel like I've already gone on for too long, so I'll tell the one experience that still really freaks me out almost 5 years later. So, around 2016 to 2017, we moved them out of the home because their health was pretty poor, and the house was just too large and too expensive for them to take care of it anymore. This meant that my mum and I had to clear most of it out and check up on it, since we were the only part of that side of the family that lived in the city. We had come to check up on it and remove things that my nana requested a few times before, but this particular time was different. You see, immediately upon walking in, we were hit with this terrible smell, like rot and sewage. My mum and I panicked when we smelt that smell. They were on a septic line, so it was entirely possible that there was a backup or a gas buildup that could ruin the house. However, after checking the sinks and the toilets and everywhere, we couldn't figure out what the smell was coming from because the water was running clear. My mum was convinced that it was something in the kitchen though, so she checked in there more while I went through the hall closet to find the things that we were trying to remove that day. And while I was in that closet, I felt air move by me as if someone was walking past me towards the back of the house down that hallway. Since it was a walk-in closet, I didn't really think much of it, as my mum could have just gone by me to check the bathroom that was down that hall in her quest to find the source of the smell. But about a minute or two later, from my uncle's old bedroom, I heard the very distinct sound of a suitcase zipper being pulled open. And this sound lasted what felt like forever, like it was just slowly being opened back there. After it stopped, I sort of freaked out and ran into the kitchen where I found my mum still checking the sink. Now, there was just no humanly way possible that she could have gone past me, unzipped that suitcase, and then went back to the kitchen without me running into her. So, I immediately freaked out and told her what I heard. My mum is a huge skeptic, so she didn't take this to be a paranormal experience, but that someone was probably squatting in the house and I had caught them. So, we pretty much left right after that. The next few times that we came before deciding to hire a trash removal company to clear the house instead of us, we never found any evidence of a squatter and we never smelt that smell again, even after not going to the house for like weeks at a time. And the real kicker to this story, the suitcase that I heard unzipped was one of the things that we were meant to find and remove for my nana that day. So I had a haunting 9 years ago. I was a single mother with a 2-year-old boy and my 9-year-old niece. I had gotten custody of my niece due to her mother being an addict. We just moved into a nice apartment and I was really excited to be able to give my kids a nice place. It was newly redone, new carpet, new walls, new trim, new everything. It was a weird setup though. When you walked in, my bedroom was on the right, living room on the left, and dining room straight ahead. To the left of the dining room was the smaller bedroom, which also had its own full bathroom. I think it was more for roommates than a family. I started having paranormal encounters, though, the same day that we moved in, so I always left both bedroom doors open at night so I could see into the kids' room past the dining table. From the start, though, I would wake up at 3:12 a.m. every night. A lot of times my son would too, but would be crying. I would wake up too, and she would always stand in the hall that led to the master bath. She would always try to talk to me, but I could never hear her. Then my son would cry, and I would go and comfort him and go back to bed, but sleep was hard to come by for me. As time went on, She would bang on the walls and where the heater was, jiggle door handles, knock photos off the wall, wake me up every single night at 3:12. She got more and more angry too that I wasn't doing what she wanted, I think. So eventually she started appearing as a black smoke-like mass. She would get closer and closer, mumbling something that I couldn't make out. My cat would flee every time, and I could just feel her anger. I could feel the tension and the frustration thick in the air. When she wasn't that black mass too, she appeared more tattered and unkempt. Her hair would be a mess when it was once done up nicely. She would look really tired, sunken in eyes, became more and more frightening. Her behavior was downright aggressive too, and the banging became so loud that even neighbors could hear it. She would rattle the doors violently. I thought someone was trying to break in at one point, but no one ever was there. My dreams were really cruel and tormented, a sort of murder, having my children kidnapped, stuff like that every night. And to be honest, there weren't many nights that I didn't cry myself to sleep. I was doing my best to raise 2 kids, one of which wasn't even mine, work a full-time job and then come home to so much negative energy. Eventually I decided to ask my neighbors about previous tenants as they'd lived there for years. And apparently a woman took care of her elderly mother here, and her mother died in my room. The apartment was totally redone because that woman literally had to wallow in her own feces. The daughter was very neglectful, and the pets were also never cleaned up after, and I also found out the reason that I was able to afford that apartment was because the rent was significantly lower than the other identical units. The manager of the apartments never told me about any of this. Anyway, shortly after I woke up again at 3:12, but instead of the old woman or blackness, I saw my son squatting on a dining room chair. I said, "Troy, why are you up?" He looked me straight in the eyes, smiled his sweet smile and whispered, "Mama." I got up to go and get him, but as I reached for him, he just vanished. My heart sank and I could barely breathe. I thought that something had happened to him, so I ran into the kids' room and they were both fine, sleeping away. I cried that night until I was so exhausted that I just fell asleep. But that's when I decided to break my lease and move out. Crazily enough too, she would unpack boxes, she would hide things, she would turn the bathroom light off when I was in the shower. She was trying desperately to talk to me and I had no idea how to listen. I mourned for her a bit. I could feel her pain, but I also had a family to take care of. I had my stuff packed and I moved in under a week. If you have any idea what it's like to be a single parent with 2 kids and a full-time job, then you know that that was an amazing feat. Oddly though, I had a really weird dream after we moved out that there was a diary hidden behind the water tank. Why I never thought to look in there when that was where she kept banging, I'll never know, but I just hope that she found peace. When I was in my late teens, I lived with my dad. We lived in a small trailer, and at the time I smoked cigarettes, and the rule was that I was only allowed to smoke in the living room at night, not in my bedroom, because the smoke would make it to his room and wake him up. So he built a 3-way bunk bed for us when we were younger that was still in use. The top and the bottom bunks faced north, and the middle bunk faced east, and there was about 3 to 4 feet of space under the middle bunk. That was my bunk. Now, it was situated in such a way that I was lying on my back and the door was directly behind my head, which was just enough room for the door to close. I hope that I'm painting the picture right, because all of this is pretty important. So one night, I'm just watching TV in my room. It's late, so I turn everything off and lay down to sleep. I don't recall how long it was until I heard the noises begin, but I start to hear what sounds like children's footsteps go up the hallway behind me, back and forth, slowly at first, and then just quicker and quicker. Then there was some light tapping on the walls, like fingers tapping on the table along with footsteps. But then the footsteps stopped directly behind me in the doorway to my bedroom, which was about 2 or 3 feet away. And the next thing that I hear is the footsteps running into my room and under my bed. To say that I was terrified is a complete understatement. I wanted to wake up my dad, but was way too scared to yell or do anything like that, so instead I grabbed my pack of cigarettes from the TV stand that was close enough to the bed that I didn't have to move much. I lit up and I started blowing the smoke over my head into the hallway. And that did the trick. My dad woke up yelling at me for smoking in my room, and the next day he asked why I was smoking in there when I'd never done that before. And I told him what happened. He listened intently, and when I was done he said that he didn't understand why I was scared. You see, my dad was a staunch believer in UFOs and aliens, anything paranormal in fact, and he figured that my 2 younger brothers and I needed to know about this stuff growing up, so he told us all kinds of stories growing up. It really scared us and still affects us to this day, and we're all in our 30s now. But he thought that that was my best chance to make contact. That was my dad, though. He was never scared of the paranormal and always just intrigued. That was 20 years ago or so now, and to this day I can still remember that night like it was yesterday. So my first job was at a McDonald's. This building was attached to a gas station and located off of a busy highway. I was 14, all kinds of bad luck at this stage, and started a 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. shift. This early in the morning, the store was usually empty, so only 3 people, myself included, were in the restaurant. The manager, who was in the back, the cook, who was also in the back, and I, the cashier, who was up front. So I was wiping down the counter when a man who looked to be in his mid-30s or early 40s came in. He didn't order anything, but went straight to the restrooms, which were in the restaurant area just around the corner from my cash. Many truckers and travellers would come in simply to use the washrooms and leave, so this wasn't too uncommon. I didn't think much of it, in fact. But after the man finished, he came up to the counter and said, "Hey, excuse me, I was just in the washroom and one of the toilets is overflowing." I immediately came around the corner and let him lead me towards the restroom. But suddenly I just got a horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach and stopped dead in my tracks. I became very aware that no one was actually in the restaurant area, and the only other 2 people in the store were in the back that would not be able to hear me if I went into the restroom. The man had the restroom door open and realized that I had paused. He nonchalantly said, "Come on in, I'll show you," which came off innocently enough, but just didn't sit well with me. I smiled and said, "1 moment, I'll just go and get my manager, okay?" And I started making my way back to the counter. "It'll only take a minute," he called out. I met my manager in the back and explained to him that a man was complaining about an overflowing toilet. My manager went to check it out, and I followed closely behind him. But when we turned the corner, the man was gone, and we entered the restroom anyway, but there was no toilet overflowing. We exchanged a look, and we never really brought it up again. But to this day, I feel like some divine intervention gave me the wisdom to know not to follow the man into the restroom. The whole situation only lasted a few seconds, but it felt like much longer than that. I was young and trusting, and this man could have done who knows what, and I would never have been hurt. In fact, he could have left, got away with whatever he had planned, and just hit the highway. Also, I never did see him again. I live in a split-level house with my boyfriend, and our bedroom is upstairs. In our bedroom, we have a half window to the house, meaning that there is a roof that comes right under our window. This window also overlooks our backyard, which is all woods and pretty much no neighbours. We never see anyone back there, which is the reason that we didn't have blinds on it. So it was late one night, and we were in bed just fooling around with the bedroom lights on, We carried on and hung out relaxing in bed for an hour or so, and then decided to call it a night. We flipped the lights off and we were falling asleep, but about 5 minutes after turning the lights off, we hear a man's voice from outside the window and a sing-song voice say, "Good night." We both froze in place, and I mustered the courage to say to my boyfriend, "Did you hear that?" He responds that he did and hops out of bed. He then goes downstairs and gets his gun out of his safe and goes into the backyard while I call the police. Listen, we all know that this was not a smart idea, so let's save it, but we did it anyway. He searches the roof and the yard for a while and finds no one. He returns in the house and replaces the gun in his armory instead of the safe, next to a MacBook Air and $1,000 of cash. The police come and take a report. My boyfriend and I have a sleepless night, but the next morning we go to work as usual. And thankfully, my boyfriend returns home first to find that our house has been broken into and completely destroyed. Everything is thrown apart as if someone was looking for one specific thing. The drawers were turned upside down, the closets were ransacked, cushions off the furniture, etc. My boyfriend calls the police, and while waiting for them to arrive, he assesses the damage, looking for missing items. And a sinking feeling sets in as he realizes that the only thing missing in the house is the gun that he went out with the night before. And when I say only, not even the stack of cash laying next to the gun was missing. After this happened, we got security cameras, motion sensor lights on the outside of our house, and blinds. The police never found the guy or the gun, and I think that we're lucky that we haven't had anything related happen again. But the question still haunts us, though. How long had he been watching us, and was it just once? Had it been since we moved in? Where was he hiding while watching my boyfriend look for him carrying that gun? What creepy message was he trying to send by only stealing the gun? I still can't shake that sing-song voice that he said that night as well. So I go to a high school with about 500 people. This happened during my sophomore year. I'm a junior now, and Mark had other issues before this happened. He started cutting his arms in class. I was sitting 2 seats away from him and watched the blood just roll down his arm. He ended up being reported to the office and was even sent to the YOC for about a month, if I'm right. The YOC is basically this youth opportunity center. It's a mental hospital sort of juvie center for kids, and he came back and he honestly seemed fine. He said that he was never really suicidal, that he only cut his arms for attention, which made sense for him because of his kind of, well, messed up childhood. But on the day everything happened, I had no clue about anything. So during my 6th hour class, the school resource officer appeared at the door of the classroom. One of my friends was standing behind him. The SRO told my teacher that he needed me immediately. I had no clue what was going on. I just thought that I was being randomly drug tested or something, as it's pretty common in my school. I tried asking why we were going to the office in the first place, and I didn't get any response. He took the 2 of us into the conference room where 2 police officers were standing, and they questioned me first. As I walked into the room, he shut and locked the door behind me. One of the police officers blocked the door, the other blocked the window. I was sort of petrified at this stage because I had no clue what was going on. But the conversation went like this. "Have you heard anything today?" About what?" "There were threats made against our school. Your name came up in conversation." "What do you mean my name came up in conversation? I haven't heard anything. Who made the threats? And who said that I would know anything about it?" "Mark made the threats. When we questioned some other people, your name popped up, and they said that you might know something." "Who said my name?" "We can't tell you." I understand that they probably couldn't tell me who said it due to confidentiality reasons, but it's so frustrating to be locked in a room with 3 police officers who are acting like you've done something wrong like that, especially when you haven't, and you don't know what is going on or who said these things. To this day, I still have no clue who mentioned me by my name. "Well, I've heard nothing. The only class that I have with him is 5th period, and he wasn't there today. We don't talk outside of class either, and the only reason that we talk in that class is because, well, we sit at the same table, so we have to work together some days. Are you sure? I'm positive. I don't know anything. All of this is news to me as well, man. Well, okay. You're free to go. They opened the door, took my friend in, and I went back to class. I was kind of off in shock, but as soon as I walked through my class door, everyone was bombarding me with questions about what had happened. I ignored them and I put my head down for the rest of the class. But later that night, I saw on Facebook that the school had posted a message. I don't remember what it was exactly due to it being deleted quickly, but from my recollection it said something like, "Parents and students of my school, 2 students reported that another student had made threats against our school. We've handled the situation and there's nothing to worry about." The actual post was longer, but I honestly don't remember it. But I told my parents about everything that happened that day, and they immediately wanted some more information. I couldn't give it to them, obviously, and at that point, I didn't know about the hit list or even his arrest. All I knew was that SG had threatened to shoot up the school. And the next day, the crap really hit the fan. I found out that he had told people about his plans during first hour, and he was taken out of class and arrested during fourth hour. He was going to do it during fifth hour, start with the class that he was in, which I was in too, and then he would head to the cafeteria. And man, do I still get chills when I think of this very moment. During lunch, my best friend came up to me and told me about the hit list Mark wrote, and even showed her during first hour. She didn't get the chance to tell me the day before, but the other guy who was there confirmed everything as well. And they both said that I was allegedly on it. I was the third name down, and evidently he described in detail how he was going to kill me. And luckily, somebody else stopped it from happening, or else I would be dead before I even got to graduate high school. To this day, I still don't know why he could have possibly wanted to kill me like that. I barely even spoke to the guy. I was polite in class if I had to work with him, and we had no negative interactions, so I honestly have no clue what I did to make him so desperately want to kill me. As I understand it, he did have a gun in his locker as well. It wasn't a joke like his friends thought. He really intended to do it. I was relieved that I was alive and that nothing happened, obviously, but I was also out of mind with horror at the thought of someone plotting my death like that. About 2 weeks later, though, my dad and I got into the Dollar General in our town. Keep in mind, my dad has no clue what Mark looks like. We walk in to buy something for dinner, and I see Mark out of the corner of my eye. He's staring at me so intensely that I just wanted to run out of the store, but I stuck close to my dad and told him to hurry. He looked at me confused, and I told him that I would explain it later. Mark was following us around the store, and I could barely breathe. I don't have the words to describe just how scared I was, but my dad and I got what we needed, left the store, and we got in the truck. As soon as I was in the truck, too, the doors were locked, and my dad turned to me and asked, "Who was that? He looked like he wanted you dead or something." And I replied that was Mark. At this point, we were thoroughly panicked, not only because he was roaming free, but because he knew where I lived. We had security cameras, sure, but knowing that person who has adamantly expressed his desire to kill you knows where you live, man, it's terrifying. The school, as well, has since acted like this never even happened. In fact, one of the administrators told me and my family that we were overreacting when we wanted to know if he'd be back at school because, according to them, I was never in any real danger. Luckily, or perhaps sadly, the kid is no longer at my school, and he's currently in some type of jail because he actually murdered his own mother. He pushed her down the stairs, and she was allegedly found dead in some sort of makeshift body bag. Thankfully, he was caught, and I don't think that he's going to get out anytime soon, but still, man, what a wild ride that was. So, first let me say that I debated about posting this here in the first place because, well, I may just be overreacting about a few weird things that have happened in the last couple of weeks here at my house, but then I decided to go ahead and share it anyway and see what you guys think about it. And please, do tell me if I am overreacting. I really won't be offended at all if anyone tells me that I'm just being silly. So first off, our house has like a basement crawl space that's only accessible from the outside, through a door directly underneath my bedroom window and about 10 feet away from the bottom of the steps leading up to the back deck. It's a fairly large space in fact, dirt floor and concrete walls, clean and plenty big enough for a grown man to stand up in. Until recently, it was sort of half full of junk, mostly from our kitchen reno, like paint cans and equipment and extra floor tiles and such, and we had a padlock on it. We asked our yard guy to do some extra work that included cleaning it completely out, and when it was empty, we didn't bother putting the lock back on though. It has a sliding bolt on it that keeps it closed in addition to this little loopy thing that you put on the padlock, so we just slid in the bolt and we called it good. I mean, there was absolutely nothing in it, so there was no point in locking it, right? Well, a couple of weeks ago, my boyfriend was out on the back deck emptying the recycling bins and noticed the door open. Someone would have definitely had to have opened it too. The sliding bolt is a bit rusty and wouldn't easily come open like that, and definitely wouldn't have opened on its own. He went and checked it out. Nobody there. Still completely empty. He thinks, well, okay, someone was obviously poking around and didn't find anything interesting, but he did tell me about it and reminded me to keep the doors locked when he isn't home. A few days after that, I had the dog outside with me, and he ran straight to the door and started sniffing and scratching at it, and I noticed that it was slightly open again. I opened it, went inside, walked around, but there was nobody there. Let me add too that we have a lot of trees and wildlife on our property, including raccoons and groundhogs in addition to tons of squirrels. We have one huge oak tree that overhangs the roof covering the master bedroom, so it's nothing unusual to hear squirrels and other animals on the roof with their little pattering feet and scratching sounds and whatnot. But yesterday I was here alone, laying in bed just reading a book. The house was completely silent. Usually the dog will lay in the bed with me, but he was sort of fidgety acting. He was pacing and just sort of acting weird in general. I was hearing the usual late afternoon squirrels or whatever on the roof, but then I heard a noise that is clearly the crawl space door creaking open. It's directly underneath the window to my right, so I stand up and creep over to the window, crack the shades a tiny bit to peek out, and I see a guy starting up the steps to the back deck, having just exited the crawl space. I immediately said, "Oh heck no," dropped the shades, and headed up the hall directly to the door that he was heading for to confront him. And at that same moment, my dog just went absolutely ballistic barking and beat me to the door, but when I got there, he was nowhere in sight. I only saw him through the window for maybe a second, and I only saw him from the back as he was heading up the steps. He was wearing some sort of a ball cap, so I couldn't have even said what color his hair was. I'm guessing that my dog scared him away, but what was he doing, just walking up to my porch in broad daylight like that, with someone obviously home, if he hadn't planned on knocking on the door? And no one would knock on that door anyway, because people come to the front to knock, not walk all the way around the back where the trees in the backyard are. I waited a few minutes though, then got my pepper spray out of my purse and went to investigate. And sure enough, the crawl space door was open again. No one inside, thankfully, but when my boyfriend got home, he put the padlock back on it. Then he got my gun out of the safe, where it's been for years, and insisted that I keep it under the mattress on my side of the bed. I only agreed to do that after he loaded it with rat shot, because I don't think that I could shoot a human being, not even in self-defense, and rat shot won't do much more than scare someone with the noise of the gunshot. He was really angry at me that I went by myself into the basement to go and check things out like that. But I'm just more angry than frightened, if I'm being honest. I don't know if I'm overreacting, that just because someone had been inside the basement a few times, I automatically assumed that the man that I saw was responsible and meant harm. I'm fairly certain that he did come from there, though, because I definitely heard the door open just seconds before I saw him on the steps. But with it locked up, though, now, I guess if someone had been routinely in and out of it, that's going to stop. Like I said, I just don't know if I'm freaking out over nothing or if this is more serious. I'm keeping my doors locked just in case, though, and I'll definitely be keeping a lookout. And if anything else happens, I'll be sure to let you guys know. My name is Luke, and I'm now 20 years old, but this story, it took place when I was 17. So, this experience, I'm still pretty perplexed by it, but it gives me chills to this day. In May of 2017, I found myself going out a lot more on my mountain bike. I was just getting bored of cruising around the streets too, so I wanted to go for a trail or woodland bike ride. I had never been to Ley Woods before then, and personally I don't think I'll ever be going alone again, but after some research into a few different areas, Ley Woods seemed to be my best bet. Living only a couple of miles away, it was a pretty nice bike ride. On arrival, it looked really peaceful, and I was almost in a dreamlike state by my first look at the place. For a woodland area in England, let alone Bristol, it was pretty much amazing. On going into the woods, I remembered seeing different colours at the start of each trail, sort of signifying difficulty for bikers and length for walkers and whatnot. Don't take my word for it though, because I still really don't know what they meant. But I decided to go down a coloured, I can't remember very well, I think it was blue, trail, to see how it was there. Finding it exciting, I decided to go down the harder trail, and here's where it starts to get a little bit weird. So I began getting this weird feeling, and I began looking around as if I was being followed by the woodlands itself. Everything all of a sudden felt like it was getting bigger and further away too, which was weird. But I brushed it off, and it turns out that I actually completely lost track of time. I got lost on the trail too, but bear in mind, I'm very observant and aware of my surroundings before this trail. But I then came to a sort of strange opening. I could go left into this rough direction of the way out, or right, deeper into the woods, I think. Being me, I decided to just go deeper into the woods. I came to a sort of weird little trail that just had dodgy written all over it. I went against my gut feeling of turning back and went down there. I came to a point of which the trail continued, but it was actually getting pretty dangerous. The trail being too bumpy for me to even walk down, I eventually just turned back. But for a few minutes before turning back, I don't know why, but I was just sort of stood still staring down the trail. I just felt like I was being watched from all angles, even though it would be near impossible to have done that. Anyway, I got nervous and began walking back up the hill as I was too tired to ride at this point. But keep in mind too, my bike tires are completely solid, no punctures, slow punctures, or even anything wrong at all. I wish I still had pictures of the bike too, but anyway, upon getting back to the spot where I originally went to the trail, this weird loss of time thing happened. It felt as if the whole path had stretched by like half a mile, as if the woodland was moving or something. I began walking up the path feeling that same eerie sensation of being watched as I did beforehand. But this time, it felt a bit more sinister. It felt as if something was about to happen. Bearing in mind, I hadn't seen a single person at this point in time since I went down that first trail. I'll explain the scenery though before continuing. So, it's a long path, a slight steep hill to my left, a very narrow river to my right, maybe 4 feet deep, maybe 4 feet wide as well. There's bushes on either side of the river with the odd tree every now and then. And upon getting about maybe a quarter of the way up the slowly inclining path, I then all of a sudden hear a woman crying from behind a tree up ahead. I start slowing down my walking pace to try and get a good look behind the tree, but the whole time I'm thinking to myself, why would someone jump across to cry behind a tree? So I edge closer to the river to look behind to see if the person is okay. Also because many people go to Lake Woods to end their lives and such, so I was hoping maybe to help this person or something. But you guessed it. When I got there was no one there, and the crying just suddenly stopped. A bit weirded out by this, obviously. I just sort of slowly turn away and I start walking again, a bit quicker now as I was pretty unnerved. I've had paranormal experiences before, but never in a place like the woods like this. It's usually in a house or some sort of a building or something, and definitely never anything as acute as that, I suppose. So this whole thing was really new to me, and I had this sudden shiver though as I was walking, and maybe a minute or so later, only a couple of meters away from where I had heard the crying, it started up again. But this time it was right opposite me across the river. I didn't bother looking this time. I started to go into a bit of a jog, and as I got faster, I heard the bushes rustling as if they, or whatever it was following me. Upon hearing this, I quickly sped up, and the crying became more and more hysterical. Bear in mind too that my bike was fine before this moment in time. I thought to myself, you know what, screw this, I'm gone. So I went to hop onto my bike with the adrenaline that was rushing through me, and I came to an almost sudden stop. My back tire on my bike had become completely flat all of a sudden, so I had no other choice but to just sprint with my bike and pray for the best that I don't trip up or end up having to throw it to run faster or something. With the crying person still close to me and keeping up, I'm running faster and faster, praying that I get off this path that I was on. I was almost in tears at this point because I couldn't actually do anything to help the situation or get out of it faster, but after what felt like, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes of running, I could finally see the car park. The crying had stopped following me and getting closer, and sort of started moving back to where I first heard it, I think. I wasn't about to hang around to find out though, so I sprinted out into the car park. I must have been as white as a sheet of paper and hysterical with my breathing and wheezing because multiple people in the car park turned to look at me like I was crazy. I saw the exit sign out of the car park and I just ran towards it. But while doing so, I noticed that my bike, it was moving a lot smoother all of a sudden. I stopped to take a quick look and I could hardly believe it, but my bike tire, it had suddenly regained all of its air and it was solid again, as it was before the unnerving crying person shenanigans. I jumped off my bike and I got away from those woods as fast as I could, and since then I've never been back. The thing that makes this really scary is that I have Irish heritage, and in Irish folklore, there's a demon woman called the Banshee. She's apparently seen in woodlands next to rivers and lakes, washing blood off of clothes. It's said that if you see her washing blood off of clothes, the person who owns those clothes will die. Alternatively, if you hear her crying, it means death apparently. I can't remember the meanings exactly of the deaths, but it means either you or a loved one will die, I think. Anyway, I don't know about all of that, but since 2017, I have lost my auntie and two of my best friends, and a dog as well, in a sort of streak of bad luck, I suppose, but I can't help but think about this when I reflect on it all. Lake Woods is no joke, that's for sure. There are many stories that have come up out of those woods. You can read online about them if you want. All you have to do is search up Bristol haunting and Lake Woods and stuff like that, and it should come up. Apparently it's rated like the 87th most haunted place in the UK, according to some places. Anyway, like I said, I haven't been back there ever since, and I'm not planning to, and I hope that you enjoyed the story.